It's not Windows thing.
I still don't understand. Wow.
Clock's off by a minute. It is.
It's 6 o'clock. Bring the meeting to order. The pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope everybody had a great Independence Day yesterday. We'll begin the July 5th, Credit River City Council meeting with approving or amending the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda that anybody would like to make? I will remove sheriff's report, as we will not have that tonight.
I'd like add 9.2, maybe we could discuss what we all discussed at our meetings at different park, different locations. We have to discuss spraying some brush and possible overlays on Casey and Fleming, Casey's edition, and culvert cleaning on Clary Place and Pharisee Lane. There you go.
Sounds good. Anybody else?
Make a motion to approve with the addition that Leroy brought up 9.2.
Thank you, Brent.
Second.
Thank you, Jay. We got a motion and a second to approve the agenda with the two changes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Consent agenda, those items on the council agenda which are considered routine or non-controversial are included as part of the consent agenda. Unless a council member specifically requested an item on the consent agenda be removed and considered separately, items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion, a second, and a vote. Any item removed from the consent agenda shall be placed at the end of general business. Tonight, two items on the consent agenda, the June 20th, 2023 council meeting minutes and approval of fund transfer and claims listings. Is there anything that anybody would like to pull from the consent agenda tonight? If not, I would take a motion to approve. Thank you, Brent.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Leroy. So we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda for tonight. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Open forum. The public forum is intended to afford the public an opportunity to address concerns to the council. The public forum will be no longer than 30 minutes in length, and each presenter will have no more than 5 minutes to speak. Topics of discussion are restricted to local governmental topics rather than private or political agendas. The council may discuss, but will not take formal action on public forum presentations. Is there anybody that would like to speak in public forum tonight? Okay, no open forum presentation, so we will close open forum and move into general business. Under general business 7.1, we have resolution 2023-19 approving a variance for the Perkins on Carbridge Court. Cindy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You may recall that back in 2021, the Perkins had applied for a variance. It's basically nearly identical to the one that is being requested now for that property at the end of Carbridge Court. It was approved back then with a number of conditions. Variances only have 1 year before they expire, and they were not able to get everything done in time to pull their building permit in that year's time frame. They are ready to do so now, so they made an application to have a new variance granted for that property. The city engineer and myself have looked at it. There isn't really anything different about our ordinances or the situation as compared to back then, so we are recommending approval subject to the conditions in the packet. They've already worked through a number of them. There's a couple that'll have to get tied up yet if this is approved, but and the planning commission also recommended approval, and there was nobody speaking against the project at the meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Council members, any questions, comments on this one? Okay. If nobody has any further questions, there is a resolution in our packet tonight, 2023-19. Brent.
I will Make a motion to approve resolution 2023-19.
I'll second.
Thank you, Brennan. Thank you, Abe. We've got a motion and a second to approve resolution 2023-19. A resolution approving a variance to permit a home to be developed on a property without planning and that does not contain the minimum frontage required on a public road. With that, all in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next up, 7.2, ownership and maintenance of trails. Cindy, back to you.
Thank you. So there are two neighborhoods that are in the process of either preliminary plat or heading to final plat, the Rancho Credit River Second Edition, as well as one that will be coming in soon for Yellowstone. And both of those have contain segments of trail shown in the comprehensive plan going through those properties. Both of the property owners have indicated that they do not wish for the trails to go through those properties for various reasons, but one part of the reason for that is that typically in the past, when trails have been constructed, they've been owned by HOAs and neither of them would like, one doesn't want an HOA at all, and the other one doesn't want their HOA to have to maintain a trail. Both of them really for a reason that is that the trail is in that location, trying to connect different neighborhoods and on its way to a future public park is really in a location that is more of a city trail rather than a HOA type of trail. So there are some concerns with that. So we did want to tee this up for discussion for you tonight to see what the city council would think. That's not to say that some trails in certain locations wouldn't be better owned by HOAs. But specifically this segment of trail running that's shown in the comprehensive plan and running through these two plats. Would it make more sense for that to be a city trail? Obviously, that's a departure from what you have been doing in the past, but it is sort of the more common practice for this type of a trail. We have looked at it and we are recommending that the council consider that those types of trail segments end up being owned by the city via either easements or fee dedication. The ownership of some type. And then to similarly plan for their ongoing ownership and maintenance. They are the level of maintenance that you put to a trail system is up to you to establish. If you're interested in going this route, we would then later come back with a trail maintenance plan for your consideration.
It's feedback a little bit, just as they slide up forward in the table a little bit.
Got it.
There we go.
Going the wrong way with it.
Yeah.
So. So we would bring that to you later for your consideration, but you can, there's a lot of leeway that the city council would have in what you would put into a trail maintenance plan. And it could be, you don't even have to treat all of your trails the same in terms of how you maintain them. So. That will open it up, I think, for some general discussion.
Sure. Cindy, are you suggesting that this then be kind of the precursor to then adjusting our zoning ordinance to fit that more, or would this just, because I think our ordinance today says the trails should be there, but ownership isn't at the disposal of the council at the time, right?
It is, so I don't, in my opinion, you don't need to update your ordinances at all.
Okay.
I think she needs to move the mic back.
No, it's a little hot. Okay. Council members, comments, questions, direction for staff?
Well, after looking at some of the other trails that the county put in and some of these other developments, these trails are along collector roads that don't have driveways coming out onto them, so to speak. And I would be in favor of the trails as long as we'd have the right of way there to put a trail in, and we'd have to mark it one side of the road or the other, so folks aren't putting their dog fencing and their sprinklers and everything else in the way of it when we go to do it. So.
Good.
I think there's a clear need to separate pedestrians from roadways when we can. especially for the future, not necessarily today, but definitely in the future. I think we should make sure that that's happening. Another thought on this is that generally we have parks and things like that that we're doing with some of the developments, and some of these that we're not. Can this serve, can building a trail, a public trail, serve as the same?
The question you're
It's a
asking?
question.
Yeah,
Yep. Just more thought.
Mhm.
This was, you're looking for thoughts.
yeah,
Meaning, can we use park dedication fees to cover a trip?
Or
Jay, is that?
actually, what I think I was thinking more is, can the developer provide that in lieu of park dedication?
so. Today, when we ask a developer to construct a trail, is that? If we are gonna require trails, is that typically along a collector road, Cindy? Or to a main road or?
Not necessarily,
Okay,
they're to be constructed in some certain situations. It could be along a collector road if you have one of those going in. It's in locations that the comprehensive plan specifies, which it is showing one in this location, and you have a couple others in other parts of the community as well. And then there are also some general pedestrian facilities in certain locations that the subdivision regs would say need to be constructed. And basically, all of these are to be constructed as part of that transportation infrastructure. So it's not something that's factored in right now into park dedication. And so if you wanted to do that, we would probably need to look at your park dedication ordinance. Truthfully, then it would also bump up your park dedication fees, because it does all have to balance out, somewhere.
sure. Dave, what are your thoughts?
What does it do to the existing HOA funded trails? Is that they stay? If the decisions to the city's gonna take on these trails territory, then and any other trail system that's HOA, would we look back at that?
I think anything's possible. I don't know that, I mean, making, at least giving guidance on. The question that staff is looking at tonight, I don't think changes that. But it could be something that we could look at in the future. I mean, you think about the current 2 requests that are, those would almost make sense then to continue in through the territories to get to County Road 8.
Right.
And that, then you would have that continuation from there all the way up and eventually, continue to the north.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, if this is in our comp plan, this is what we're looking to do is have a trail system. In my opinion, wouldn't we be liable for the expense then as a city? Otherwise, you lose all control over what that trail system looks like. Maybe unmanaged.
And to Abe's question, my thought was if we only would take responsibility, say the territory trail. That's along Dakota, along the collector. The rest of it that they put in. Saying it's in shambles, but it's not, it wasn't in the best of shape, they've improved it. And if you get over the Stone Bridge, you're talking about some thing that goes through the swamp. That,
Yeah,
so if we'd only take responsibility for the ones that are along the collector road. In the future, not their whole trail system. So.
I think, my thoughts, Mike, I think the key to this is that if we're requiring trails to be built in certain areas. And generally in the main roads or stuff like that, then it should be our responsibility to maintain them. Doesn't mean we have to snowplow.
No, absolutely
No,
no.
doesn't mean we need, but seal coating is, just like in the ones in the county trails, right? We cost share in the seal coating of those. What, every 6-7 years or something like that happens. But yeah, I think that's, if we're asking for that, to happen and asking it to be dedicated trail area for public, that definitely should be on the city to maintain.
How do you do that then from a? Just thinking, so we want that one piece. We require that and then developer wants to put additional somewhere in, then that's on them.
Yeah. Here's what's required, anything above and beyond is
Our,
upon the HOA.
and our current plan just has this one trail system. I mean. Is there anything else in Credit River that we're looking at in the immediate?
There are some others on the trail plan map, but they're in the northern part of the community and. Not areas that we think are likely to be impacted for the next few years anyways, by development.
And where is that?
Like 170th Street has a trail, in the comp plan along it. Actually, I think
There's
was that exhibit?
down from Murphy Park. Or
Right.
from
Yeah.
Riverhead down to the south from there, a little bit through, I think, some of the easy property.
I think what's important is to, at least for the future, allow for connectivity. And that's kind of what our plan, what the comp plan kind of provides for. And perhaps maybe if we were to only identify the trails that did connectivity, those would be the ones that we would actually look to maintain, and anything else would be just for the benefit of HOAs and developers, et cetera. And then we just keep a short list of what's there and make sure that going forward in the future that we actually connect things. And require that, and if we need to require somebody to put one in as they develop, just so that we get point A to point B, connect the parks, which is part of our all of the parks and things like that. I think you just want to get the kids off the roads
Mhm.
and have them have a way to get through Credit River. It also, I think it enhances Credit River quite a bit by having something like that.
Abe, to answer your question, you can see along 170th Street, that one's kind of hard to see right there.
Yeah.
And then that one would also potentially come north into here to connect to Prior Lakes Trail along Markley Lake. And then even potentially connecting theirs around the north side of Markley Lake eventually. And maybe even coming out of Country Quarter Franciscan area back in 27 in that area. Additionally, Three Rivers has always thought that they'd put a connect Cleary to Murphy through a trail in this area.
Right.
But they didn't do anything about that 10 years ago and let the easement go away, so.
Yeah, the other one is we always thought a better connection for that would be up along the Credit River rather than through neighborhood over there. So that's why we have this one along there highlighted in there. And then again, the one that is kind of coming up as an imminent decision is the one north of the Dakota corridor.
Are we asking for action on this?
I think staff is asking for like direction. So that
So basically A or B?
kind of, right, is it, again, we have that option in our ordinance today that says. A trail can be either A, owned by and maintained by the HOA, or B, the city. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, staff is looking for direction on. When and where that should be applied.
Right, and it's directly related to your next agenda item. So if you recall a couple months ago when you heard the preliminary plat for the ranch at Credit River, there was a fairly decent sized discussion at the city council level about that trail, and we ended up crafting a very specific condition in that resolution about that trail, to include it unless the council decided otherwise and differently, and that it would be owned by the HOA. So Mr. Feldman will be looking to come in with his final plat very soon. And we need some specific direction so that we can guide him on how to prepare that plat. And then he has some understanding of what might occur.
So the verbiage on there is what I'm most concerned about is how do we delineate when it's an HOA and when it's a city, right? Because my personal opinion, I tend to agree, is if we're mandating
Yeah,
a trail through here, I think that's ours, but if the HOA decides to do more, that's on them.
agreed.
So I think we should have to put the verbiage in there correctly.
Yeah,
I'm a little less worried about that, as you get plat in. It'll be pretty obvious, I think, to you, which ones should be which, and then we would cover those within the development agreements.
Okay.
And the approving resolutions for those plans.
I think the direction we give to them helps staff draft the comment letter in that manner, right? You know, giving that feedback of, you know, when if we're mandating it and it's city responsibility. You know, I think that would come to us, you know, come to the planning commission, then come to us already drafted anyway.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Brent.
So I think what I'm hearing from everyone is option A, the plan that the trail segments constructed to meet the requirements of the city ordinances be owned by the city. Be it easements or fee dedication ownership. Sounds like we are all in agreement on it.
Mhm.
We all want trails. We know, I mean, you go to other cities, even city of Prior Lake has a fantastic system. Points, you got a plan for that and. But I agree, if a developer HOA wants to have more connectivity. It not necessarily something we would do more for the masses in terms of doing it. We may be, I mean, we might be plowing trails at some point, who knows? Just because we aren't now. Could be 10 years from now, possibly, but I think to have the infrastructure there, they have the plan makes sense, so I would say option A is what I would think would be the best bet at this.
Another thing to think about. On the southern part. With the 2.5 acres, 5 acre lots, whatever they are. You have a driveway coming out every 200-300 feet. So you're gonna have a trail in between there and you go to maintain this trail. You're going over all these folks' driveways. And I plan not to be on the board at that time, but your phone's gonna ring and they're gonna complain about their. Concrete being scratched if we do plow or seal coating getting over onto their concrete or pavers or whatever, so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that actually not their property? At the point where it would be crossing an easement for a trail?
It's in our right of way, but it's still their driveway.
They maintain it.
They maintain the driveway
Yeah.
and we're generally trying to be respectful of
Right,
driveways
right.
when we do work around them. You know, even, you know, there's. When we've done road reconstruction
Mhm.
projects in the past, we've avoided driveways or reconstructed when there's cement or, you know. We try really hard to avoid that situation. Because it is a, you know. People take a lot of pride in their homes and a lot of their driveways and everything like that and. We just, you know. Try to be respectful of that.
Yeah,
one,
we could
so.
plow those with a V plow or whatever and could have. Both sides would have to be dug out again. You know, the darn down plowed me in those. Not that any of us had those calls, but.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's kind of why they work really well on the collector roads on the county's trails. Because they have their 1/4 mile intersections, and not have driveways coming out.
but we don't, the ones in the county roads don't get plowed in Credit River either,
No, I know they don't,
so
But they made some,
not this year, anyway.
today they don't,
Right. Or snowmobile trails.
yeah.
I'm hearing everybody thinks A is.
So one last question, funding. So would this be a new item that we're putting on the budget then for 24? Where is this funding coming from?
Maintenance in the future would be. There wouldn't be no required maintenance.
Do we have any idea what we're talking about for funding? How much expense we're talking about right now? I know this would be the first segment. I'm not sure how to even frame it. Are we
So-
thinking far enough in advance to say how is this funding coming? where's it coming from? I mean, from seal coating and mowing is really the large expense, right? So do we have any idea how much per linear foot we're talking on average? I mean, do we know what that is? Are we just writing a blank check?
We got 5 years to build a kitty up. So we have to-
Or more, but yeah, more than five, it's probably more like 10 years away before that maintenance required.
Well, they're still mowing.
But not even constructed.
They're still mowing though.
Right,
Yeah,
Well, we wouldn't be mowing trails. We.
mow the sides.
Don't mow the easement today.
no, we
I've
don't.
seen it both ways.
We have some people that think we should be taking care of this one there.
That's,
No, we're not mowing now. I don't know why we would mow those. I mean, we're mowing ditches on,
Or 9 feet, that's
Yeah.
it.
right.
So then it'd be truly just maintenance of the trail itself, no mowing.
I mean, we could certainly ask
Yeah.
Shane to come up with an idea of what a maintenance plan would look like and cost per mile or whatever on the trail. We're not gonna have as much traffic as you would have on the street. We're not gonna have, eight garbage haulers a week, or whatever it ends up being. I would hope it would be better than, but probably, well, it probably wouldn't even be as bad maybe as your driveway. Because you can have bikes, and people walking.
You know, it's the UV from the sun and all that, that eats at the oil and all that, so. Whether that gets done. Every 7-10 years.
Sure.
And I don't think it's
Yeah.
necessarily something that has to derail,
No.
but I think when we start talking budget, that we should start thinking about that
Yeah,
immediately.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely, 100%, it has to be a piece of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, how much does it cost to ask Shane that question? That's another.
Well, I mean, it would definitely, Jay, it would have to be something in the future that we have to consider as budget comes up. And then again, anytime we do any of that maintenance work, it's always, work with the engineer to get an engineer's estimate for a budget number and. Approve the final agreements in the year that they're going to be done. But again, who knows what the price is gonna be.
Seal coat those places.
Yeah.
Years.
Yeah.
They kind of look like it too.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
need a little bit of,
yeah,
They're
I'm just-
due again.
I'm just thinking as we
Yeah.
have more and more expenses coming up, what are we adding on here? And I know it's not significant for this one little piece we're talking about, but we start expanding 170th, we start expanding, this, we start expanding Murphy, we start having quite a few miles on there. So,
And the park won't kick a penny in on the Murphy ones.
depends if it's their trail.
They haven't on any other roads, so.
Okay, so again, just to confirm, is everybody in general agreement then with, giving staff the direction that if we're gonna require a trail. That the city would only maintain that then.
yeah,
I would say option A.
City, is that
Caveats.
the direction you're looking for?
Yep.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, let's move into general business number 7.3, resolution 2023 20, the ranch at Credit River Second Edition Trail Variants. And Plan and Ash, would you?
Thank you. So coming out of that previously mentioned city council meeting where we did put that specific condition in the preliminary plat for the ranch at Credit River Second Edition. The developer did come back and after we kind of talked about, well, how do we figure out a path to go forward to get an answer on that question? He did come back and apply for a variance to not have to install the trail, basically. In that section, I do believe that his concerns are a couple fold. He doesn't. The HOA part of the question is definitely a large part of it, but he does also have concerns about installing the trail in front of or behind the lots. His opinion was that the people who would be buying lots there would not necessarily want a trail in their neighborhood. We did have a public hearing on this question at the last planning commission meeting, and the planning commission recommended denial of the variance. The findings are in the draft resolution that's in front of you. And, because that will walk in,
If Bill's here.
so he may have something that he'd like to share with you, but
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Bill, would you like to speak before we discuss this at all, or Brad? Brad, I don't know that microphone's on. If you hold the square button down until the green light comes on, please. Thank you.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions. Until maintenance responsibility is resolved, it sounds like you're going in the way of the city being responsible. But it's not in any ordinances as of today. How can you mandate us to put a trail in at this time with not having any idea of a budget for maintenance? Or who's gonna take care of it? I mean, you seem to be going away of the city, but we don't, kind of feels like we're winging it right now. You guys put the ordinances in when Frederick became a city, but you had really no planning past that. But now you're making us put a trail in that we wholeheartedly disagree with. You're talking about a trail going in front of $300,000 to $400,000 lots with $3 million homes on them. Some of these lots are not that deep, that trail is gonna be close to their house. And there seems to be no concern for that, or no response for that. You just say, we're putting the trail in, that's it. There are better places for the trail. The ranch, Yellowstone, it's gonna be different than Territory and Monterey. They're not the same. You have lower density versus higher density. You have open spaces, open community areas. That doesn't exist. That's not the way this development was designed. So I guess we're just looking for answers in that direction. I don't know if anybody has any of those answers.
so your ordinances already allow you to either publicly own the trails or to have the HOA own them at your discretion. So I think with the option A that you've selected, I think that's an indication that in this case, you would, when this came in for final plat, that you would accept those as public trails, and we would include that in the development agreement for that. At least that's when we set it up for you for your consideration. And then I think we did leave the conditions open enough that if they wanted to find a different location winding through the plat where it wasn't in the street, not the front yards, you could potentially put it through some other areas to get to up to where that future park might be. But ultimately, it's still going through that area of the comprehensive plan. So it's a discussion topic for all of you, but
Yeah, and I think to your point of the discussion we just had, I don't think that necessarily says we're winging it. I think that's who's actually paying for it. Right? In the ordinance, the way I read it is either or, right? Now, to your point of where should it be? That's a question I think we should address and look at it. To your point, where else would be better? Right? If that's the corridor that we wanted to go down, where's a better spot for it?
County Road 91. Because you guys want this trail to go to a park that's doesn't exist now, and probably not going to exist for 20 or 30 years. And so the trail's going to dead end at the edge of a cornfield. When that park does exist eventually, however long it is, 30 years, it's going to be closer to County Road 91. We ghost platted this with no trail in mind. But the most important part of the ghost plat was a park that doesn't even exist. And it's not going to exist. I mean, we got hung up on the park for a couple of weeks. Well, where it's going to be, well, it doesn't matter because it's not going to be there for a very long time. A lot of things can change in 30 years. Now, trail along 91, north and south, would connect to the trails of the roundabouts on both ends of 91. Or at least on the south end.
Then we're back in the same boat with the existing homes, right? Trail in front of their house. Do we have the plat? Do we have the,
I think it's in the packet. But we can, let me grab it here, I can show it.
To Brad's point, though, the territory is a completely different development than what they're proposing because of the open space design. And we really don't have any driveways fronting Dakota on that entire stretch, where their development has a separate driveway every 300 feet.
It's not black and white, right? There's gray area in there. You know, it's totally, they're totally separate areas.
I did go back and just now look at the concept plan review when we were looking at the much larger area, including park. And part of the comments even back at that time were that that there should be a future trail connecting from territory to that future park.
Was for first phase? When we were doing first phase?
When we were, but we had you guys do the concept
Yep.
for the whole life.
Yeah. So that was before Credit River became city?
No,
It was the same time. In the process,
I don't know if that matters,
I'm just wondering when the ordinance would have, but
the ordinance within effect, so.
The ordinance would have been in fact back in 2020.
yeah,
So.
yeah, so when I look at that, I'm not sure exactly where that trail. Are we talking right along the road?
Right along this road.
Yeah.
So then this would connect down to. The territories down this direction. So then that is, if we looked at that other map that we looked at before, Abe. That would be the guidance of the trail dashed in the red down there.
Yep, for sure.
and the likelihood of a trail connecting on the north end of that where that dead ends is. Almost zero.
Council members, any other comments, questions?
Mr. Mayor, I do have the concern of having the trail with driveways every 300-400 feet, because if it's gonna be our trail, we're gonna maintain it. At some point, if we would plow, we would have that same situation that Leroy had mentioned before. And you know, we wouldn't necessarily be plowing when the streets are gonna be plowed, but if we have the situation we had, you know, this past winter, you'd be blocking people's driveways. Possibly.
Okay.
Because it is residential and you do have the, and you do have the. And you have the driveways coming in. And I think with the level of home that is going to be built in this development, you're gonna have people that will be really angry if anything. Was that putting it?
good.
Really angry.
It was
Really,
good. It was good, Brent.
really angry.
Does it have to be snow plowed? Be snow blown? Different piece of equipment?
Absolutely, a lot of cities snowball
It
trail.
would seem almost to be
Plows.
more efficient, and that would
Mhm.
completely eliminate any worry about putting windrows in somebody's driveway or
Mhm.
scraping it.
Again, that would be, should the city decide. to
Down the
do
long
it
stand,
someday.
but I think we have to look at that.
Yeah, I mean,
We
there's
probably
probably-
will at some point, I would think,
I don't know,
maybe not.
it's not a comment we've heard yet.
No, that's true. No one has come in and said, please,
My guess
please
is,
plow trails.
my guess would be is the first one would be 27. 'cause
Yes.
Some people want to get down from Savage down to Cleary. But we haven't heard that yet. But you're right, it probably does come at some point.
We just feel that there is a better place for the trail. Instead of putting a trail through a neighborhood like this is going to be. In front of people's houses or behind them in their backyard. There's just better options out there. And it's not going anywhere, dead ends. You can still, if we put a trail along 91, we can still get to the park, that's the whole idea. For people to be able to walk to a park like this.
So we don't have control over a trail on 91. That would be a Scott County item that would probably only happen if 91 got reconstructed to you know,
3-lane or
3-lane or 4-lane, whatever. That's not something that's in our control. Certainly couldn't make that happen now. Then they don't, there's enough easement along 91 in some of those areas today.
Oh,
Jay?
we're requiring connectivity with the streets already, and it looks like they've designed it that. Why wouldn't we also require connectivity with the pedestrian pathway through? Same thing, we've got streets. It's gonna be a public street. I'm not sure that I see a big difference between a public street and a sidewalk next to it, essentially. Versus, versus a private neighborhood. I understand I understand it's important. It's probably a great selling feature, but we're also setting a precedent that we don't need them, don't need connectivity some places. So.
There's a lot of places without connectivity right now, doesn't seem to be a problem.
That could be viewed as a mistake in the past.
Or benefit.
Right.
People move out to this area to get away from that type of thing. They want their privacy. They don't want people walking past the front of their house or through their backyard at 6, 7 o'clock at night. They want their privacy. That's why they move out, spend a lot of money on 2.5 acre lots. And that's the big difference between living out here versus living in Lakeville or living on the north side of 185th. Needs to be taken into consideration. Otherwise, Credit River becomes something totally else. That's not what it's been.
Interesting, however, at most of our community events over the last 2 weeks that we have, trails was an important thing that came up in almost every one of them.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying
Actually, Casey's was pretty loud, wasn't it? Yeah,
there's a time and place for trails. That's all I'm saying. Trails can be nice. As long as you're not walking across somebody's front yard or along their backyard.
Or driving on a street in front of it.
is there you think, Cindy, do you think there's a way to wiggle a trail through Yellowstone and through the ranch without really getting into any of these lots and have it end up on 91 out there?
So,
someplace?
I don't know, I haven't looked at that.
Yeah.
I doubt it. Well, I doubt it in a way that would not has to go either in front of or behind somebody's lot,
Mhm.
which is apparent concern here. The resolution that you adopted a couple months ago on this does give them a lot of flexibility to try to find a different location if they do not like it specifically along Dakota Trail and to propose something different. Specifically, how you had worded that condition was that the developer shall provide a trail as discussed in the staff memo, which shall be constructed as developer solar fence and shall be maintained by the homeowners association, and that's kind of modified by your last action. Unless determined differently by the city at the time that approval of the final plat. The location and composition of the trail shall be subject to the approval of the city. So I do think they have the flexibility to. If for some reason that specific location along the Dakota doesn't work for them, they could propose something. Come back that's different. You know, if they'd rather have it in the back than the front or something.
So Dakota's connecting from territory to ranch, correct?
Correct.
Back to Jay's point, what's stopping people from walking on the road past the house? I just don't, I don't see, I get more of the concern about the driveway, to be honest, than people in front of the house when the road's right in front of them. I think getting a trail through there is not as big of a impact since they can walk on the road right in front of their house anyways. But I would think we got to keep the people off the road too, being that we're gonna have now potentially more traffic coming through there. So that's my kind of thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, my thoughts are, you have 165th Street as a prime example. There's a lot of developable on another end. And when it was built originally, it really wasn't a collector. It wasn't a collector, and it really didn't connect things. Now, by default, it's gonna probably wind up connecting a lot. And you're gonna have kids that are gonna be using that as their pathway too. And there's no street, there's no sidewalk, there's no trail. And that's something that needs to be put back in there, and it really won't matter, but it really will need to be there at some point. As the traffic starts picking up more and more and more. I mean, in my childhood, I grew up very rural. We had a lot of little tiny communities around, and we had a US highway. There are 3 less kids from my childhood that are not with us because of incidents with vehicles. And, you know, I just kind of think that to say, hey, because we're gonna have a street and we're not gonna have a sidewalk or whatever, because we have a lot, it's just wrong. We need to think about putting them in. 165th is gonna need something at some point. Who's gonna put it in? It's a bigger problem to put it in later than it is to be done earlier. And if it's, you know, the thing is if it goes nowhere, nobody's gonna use it. So they'll still have their privacy. Just,
I said,
What's that, Brad?
I said with an eyesore.
oh,
That's all.
Subjective.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
So, council members, we did have, you know, recommendation from the planning commission after a long discussion in their meeting. You know, to deny the variance, which is the resolution that we have for us tonight. Any more comment or discussion on that?
Mr. Mayor, so one option is to have the developer look at another route for a trail. If we're deciding that the city would maintain it, it wouldn't be an HOA maintained. Can we give the developer an opportunity to come up with a trail, another connection that would work for them and that would probably work for us? And I mean, I don't want to have the situation where we say we'll come up with something and we'll tell you whether we like it once we see it. But is there a way to work with them collaboratively between the city and the developer, come up with something that will work for everybody?
Well, those are always an option, right? So you tell the final plat is approved, right? But that's not the decision that they're looking for tonight. Tonight, we're looking for whether or not we're gonna require the trail to be built. So they're asking for a variance tonight.
Right.
To not build the trail.
And my thought is we want a trail built. But I don't think we know exactly where it should go, and. Sounds like the developer would be open to it possibly. If it was not maintained by the HOA.
I didn't hear that.
Okay, I thought I was hearing that.
Oh,
So if I
we
wasn't
didn't
here,
know.
if I was hearing that, I'm mistaken, I apologize.
You know, I think the developer's been clear that they don't want to build a trail.
At all.
Right.
Well, if I could just say one thing here, that it's very difficult to.
Bill,
look
if
at
you
it.
can you stand up to the,
Yeah.
just so that everybody online, everybody can hear you as well, please. Thank you, Bill.
Let's go.
It's on. Oh, push it down. There you go.
Okay,
Be good.
it's just very difficult. If you put the map up again.
Yeah.
So I agree with Brent. I'm taking another look at it. Our other option is possibly going, this is the only way to go. Is in back of the homes here, to get out to here. And I don't know how we wiggle it back here, because we got one road with lots on each side. So it's very challenging to accomplish that. So when we put the first phase in 20, got our approval in 21. You had the ordinance in place in 20. You saw my ghost plat. When I did the first phase, there was no mention of trails whatsoever.
There was.
I worked on my whole second phase to get approval, and then at the very end. The trails is brought up.
The trails were brought up through the entirety of the review of the second phase. And they were also brought up during concept plan.
After I had it all done. And it was not brought up during concept plan. Otherwise,
The memo.
I'd like to see it.
I can send it to you after this meeting.
Yeah, pull it up. So this is thrown at us. From the air, because we had no knowledge of trails whatsoever. When we designed this development. Did our ghost plat for second and third phase and the future. We would have done things differently if that was. Brought up, we would have had to work in a different angle for our development.
And Cindy, what's the date on that?
The date on this memo is
And that was a memo for the original concept plan.
July 15th, 2021.
And when did we get approval?
Sometime after that.
Not long after, we had preliminary plat approval, I think before July. Not sure, but I'm. Any question for me?
Council members, any more questions for Bill?
I just have one that. So we're gonna put this trail in. Going to a park, future park. When the trail doesn't go out to 91. Through the first phase.
So why was my first phase approved without a trail?
Because it was supposed to be coming from territory up to the future park. And your first phase didn't come far enough west to have that make a difference. And your first phase preliminary plat was approved in October of 21.
Again, it's a trail going to nowhere. Nothing's gonna happen with it. You'll be fixing that trail before that park ever goes in. You'll be redoing the whole trail. And there's gonna be people squabbling when you're messing around in their yard, trying to get this trail fixed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Okay. Council members, any other thoughts? Again. The question to answer tonight is whether or not to grant the trail variance. As part of resolution 2023-20.
You need a motion?
We would need a motion one way or another.
I make a motion that we follow staff's advisement and deny the variance.
Okay, got a motion by Councilmember Satterclough,
And I'll second that.
got a second by Councilmember Zanto. Any further discussion? So I've got a motion and a second to approve resolution 2023-20. Resolution denying the variance related to a trail in the ranch of Credit River, second edition. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Nay.
One opposed. So it passes 4-1. Move on to general business number 7.4, adult use of cannabis and low dose THC product discussion. Administrator Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. To get to a place here to share my screen.
Perfect.
Put this up, so. As we talked tonight about recreational marijuana and the low dose THC edibles. This is really to tee up the discussion so we can get some guidance from council on which direction you want us to go in regards to these two items. And it is to remember these are two separate items. They're kind of merging a little bit here with the 2023 legislation. But we do have two separate items that we're looking at, so I'll kind of walk through them for us. 2022, the state legislature passed the legalization of the sale of the edible cannabinoid products. Basically, this is what we're calling the low dose THC. These are the edible products that were approved in 2022. Council in August of 2022 adopted an interim ordinance which established a moratorium on the sale, testing, manufacture, and distribution of the THC products, so these low dose edibles, in order to protect public health, safety, and welfare of the residents. That moratorium was in place for 1 year. That statutorily is the length of time that we can have that in place to kind of do this research and to study what we want to do with it. So that interim ordinance is in effect until July 31st of this year. So we kind of need to look at that and see what we want to do with the low dose THC edibles. The second piece of this is the 2023 legislation that passed legalizing adult use cannabis. This legalizes the possession, use, manufacturing, and sale of certain products in the state. And it also created an Office of Cannabis Management, which is charged with enforcing and organizing the regulatory system for the cannabis industry. To note is the THC edibles, those low dose ones approved in 2022 are also going to fall into this Office of Cannabis Management regulatory structure. But that office and the regulatory structure that they're establishing is not expected to be in place until January of 2025. Which leaves kind of an interim period of time right now between the expiration of our ordinance, our moratorium on the low dose in the end of this month, and the regulatory structure that's going to be coming into place from the state level in January of 2025. So we kind of have this gap right at the moment on the low dose, with these two different sets of legislation that was adopted. Under the 2023 legislation, there was a lot more information in here on local government's role. Under this legislation, local governments cannot prohibit the possession or transportation of the cannabis flower. And this is looking more at the recreational level at this point in time when we're talking about those. Local governments can adopt reasonable restrictions on the time, place, and manner of operations of cannabis businesses. And they may prohibit, they do set up certain defined distances. They can prohibit the sale within 1,000 feet of a school or 500 feet of a daycare, residential treatment facility, or an attraction public park. That's usually used by minors. In addition, local governments will be given the opportunity to review applications for cannabis business to ensure compliance with our local zoning regulations. We will have register the cannabis business, retail business. They will be licensed by the state, but we can register them at the local level. And we can limit the number of registrations under the statutes to no fewer than one for every 12,500 residents. Obviously, Credit River does not have 12,500, so we're in this gray zone of do we have to allow somebody? But there is also a second kind of registration, which is if the county has one active registration for every 12,500, then a city could limit a cannabis business. So there's two levels there looking at that 12,500. So it's not only 12,500 for a city, but also 12,001 for every 12,500 within the county. And then the city has the responsibility of conducting compliance checks, or registering them, so we know who has it, who's doing it, and then we have an obligation to conduct compliance checks once they're in business. And so that's kind of what's laid out in the statute as kind of the big pieces there of the local government role. There's some more details going into it. Those are some of the bigger pieces. Questions remain on how some of this comes together and how all of it is going to work. What does the licensing structure look like? How does this 12,500 affect those of us that are smaller than that? And a lot of details yet to come as the Office of Cannabis Management stands up and starts putting it into a structure into place. So kind of the last bullet on here is the local government role, and this is kind of maybe the biggest one that the state legislation gives us is the ability to adopt an interim ordinance prohibiting the operation of a cannabis business for the purpose of protecting the planning process and health, safety, and welfare of the residents. This legislation specifically grants the ability to do this until January 1st of 2025. So it goes outside of the typical allowance of a 1-year interim ordinance and allows this for a longer period of time. The key is this interim ordinance may not be used to extend the previous ordinance. So this cannot extend our low dose THC interim ordinance. So this is strictly on the recreational side, which leaves that gap period that extends from the July 31st until the anticipated January 2025 state structure is in place. So that's kind of set up in the 2023 legislation. So staff's recommendation for council to consider and discuss tonight and give us guidance is to look at adopting an ordinance on the low dose THC, so the edible products, that would require a business license with the city until the state licensing structure takes effect. And then for the sale of the low dose THC edibles. And then with that, we can put into place certain regulations for that health, safety, and so forth of the sales. Along those lines, we did have a proposed kind of draft ordinance in the packet tonight for council to consider. Which sets up that kind of low dose edibles, a licensing structure and who's authorized, and also kind of those regulations. As we look at who can get on, how do we do it, where would they be located? It does have the distance restrictions that are in the 23 legislation for the 1,000 and the 500 feet. If council wants to go down that route of staff's recommendation here with a low dose ordinance, there are a couple tweaks that we know in that draft ordinance that we would propose before it becomes finalized, which is the draft as we have it currently written doesn't necessarily restrict it just to commercial and industrial zones. Which could create some confusion if we look at, does somebody want a home occupation to sell THC edibles? So we would propose in a final one that we would put in a little bit more language there that would restrict it within our zoning to commercial or industrial. Along with the distance requirements and the other things that are in there. So that's kind of staff recommendation one for council to consider if that's what you would like. Kind of be, it is kind of a stopgap until January 2025, at which point in time we get the state structure, and then we'll have to look at ours to have additional structure in place in 2025 to kind of move the recreational and the low dose forward from there. But this would be the stopgap ordinance for that time period. And then the second one, the second recommendation here is on the recreational marijuana, is to adopt an interim ordinance that is allowed by the legislation prohibiting the operation of a cannabis business within city limits until that January 1st, 2025 date that the legislation allows us to do. I've had conversations with many of the Scott County administrators to see what's going on, and I would say the majority of the cities within the county are looking at the moratorium on the recreational marijuana until that January 1st, 2025 date. And most of them are looking at, if they haven't already adopted some kind of an ordinance on the low dose, to adopt some kind of ordinance along these lines for the low dose in the interim. But I'm happy to answer any questions. I was on the phone as well, and I know he can help with the drafting of this ordinance and some other stuff if we wish to go that way on the low dose, and happy to answer any questions. But just looking for guidance so we can bring these back and do the proper public hearing notices and everything else for them at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Council members, thoughts, questions? Abe, you have the look in your face.
I've got all kinds of thoughts, yeah. I'm trying to think how to say it, other than I think it's not good for our community. I want to restrict it as much as I possibly can. I think the low dose is, quite frankly, the most frightening ones, because that enables the kids to get their hands on it easier. So, you know, when I look at eligibility for these licenses, can we just take out, there's A through D, right? There's a vendor selling primary tobacco related products and or THC products, restaurants selling prepared food, vendors selling primary CBD, and vendors selling primary vitamins. Does it have to be those four? Or can we just take it down to the one vendor selling primary CBD products? Proximity to schools, 1,000 feet's not that far to walk for a kid. Now, do we have a school in Credit River right now? No. But I think it's our opportunity to set it up so it's very difficult for kids to get their hands on. I think the proximity to certain establishments, 500 feet. My driveway isn't that far to walk to go get something. And I just think that we're doing a disservice to our kids or those that are in residential treatments already. I think that we're setting a really poor precedent for it. That's my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you, Abe.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman
at this
Lawson.
point, why would we not go with the staff recommendation. Like Kathy said, it's a stopgap situation, but to get the low dose one tweaked up with the additions and then adopt the interim ordinance.
Can it be handled by just restricting a license until January 2025 for all cases?
Kathy, do you know what the restrictions available today are on the low dose, or, you know, again, relating back to the ordinance? And I think that's where you're kind of going, is, are there additional restrictions?
Well, yeah.
that Abe was suggesting to that point, or is this with today's legislation?
Let me clarify. What I'm thinking is, because we don't know what the state is gonna do yet. We have no idea. And so it'd be very foolish for us to come out and try to create our own law before the law that governs the whole thing is, or the rules are presented. And they're giving us an opportunity to say, wait and see what we give you. January 2025. I think that coming up to January 2025, we're going to know more about previous to that, what they're going to be doing. My question is, can we tie all of this to requirement to have a license within the city limits of Credit River to do any of it? And then postpone the licensing until January 2025.
I saw Bob, he
Just
popped
back
up
in.
on screen, so I'm gonna, Bob, do you wanna take that one first?
Yeah, Councilman Sarvat, I believe this ordinance, the statute was drafted to allow for what we've been calling the low dose cannabis. We don't have the ability to basically prohibit it outright. We don't have the ability to just say, no, we're not going to allow it. I think that we have to have, it's almost like, consider it like adult use. You have to have it somewhere in the city. What we're trying to do as staff, when I drafted this ordinance and the stuff, we're trying to be it as restrictive as we think we can go without running afoul of somebody coming into court and saying, your ordinance is too restrictive. It doesn't meet the requirements of the statute. And therefore, the court's going to take over and the court will dictate what is allowed, not the city council. The change that was not in your draft, but you was mentioned here, is to try and restrict it not only to A, B, C, and D, but also to restrict it to industrial and commercial zoning districts. So we're saying, yes, if you meet the requirements of 2A, B, C, and D, but you all have to be in the industrial and commercial zoning district. That's staff's recommendation. And that's, so I guess I would recommend to the city council that they consider going through the process to adopt the THC low dose ordinance as drafted. And also, I would strongly encourage you to adopt the moratorium that statute allows, because we just do not know what the rules are going to be. And this is a very fluid, the statutes are not very well written. You can read it a million times trying to discern what exactly are you allowed to do and not allowed to do. But the basis, when I read it, is I believe we have to allow it at some point, but we can put some reasonable restrictions on it.
So Bob, question for you. if you don't mind. Are A, B, C, and D a requirement or that they have to be in there? And also, is the distance a requirement in the statutes?
Statute does not list distances. So that is a liberty that I took when I was putting this together. We insert that because they inserted it in the new cannabis legislation that's going online. That's the adult use ordinance or statute. And so my argument to a judge would be, if you allowed it in this ordinance, you saw that that was something that was reasonable. And you gave us that authority to restrict the proximity to schools and the proximity to other establishments. Why wouldn't you allow that with regard to the low dose edibles? But no, council member, it is not in the statute that specifically gives us that authority. We're assuming that we would have that authority. We're trying to make this as restrictive as possible.
But what you're saying, Bob, then is, if I heard you right, that it's likely to be in the future that this will probably be the state mandate.
My guess is that given this legislature and given that they have pushed this through and basically said with regard to the sale of adult use, that you cannot restrict that, you cannot prohibit that, I guess, way, not restriction, but prohibit. This Office of Cannabis Management goes online, that this ordinance will be absorbed by the state. I think the state will then tell us what we can do, and this is nothing more than a placeholder until such time as the state gives us further guidance on what rights do we have or don't have. But every city attorney that I've talked to about this is all in agreement that we all look at this ordinance that we all spent time drafting is probably not going to last very long. But we all agreed that we have to have something to keep some control and government oversight of this new industry that's coming out. I'm getting calls in my office from attorneys, asking about it in different communities. And I think that this is something that to have some regulation, this is as restrictive as I thought I could get and still survive in court if we had a challenge.
Okay. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, I don't like it, but it answers my question. So we're saying we would put in there industrial and commercial as well?
Yes, in the draft that I prepared last week, it just didn't get your packet.
Okay.
We've got an updated draft that would have the commercial and industrial requirement as well to kind of add it. As we looked at it, that was a piece, but packet was out by the time I got that one in, so we modified that one.
So
Jay,
are we required or needing to act on this tonight? Or can we get a revised version of that for the next meeting?
yeah, so we would have to go back, revise it, publish it, that this is an upcoming ordinance and hold a public hearing.
Okay,
And we were also thinking that the public hearing would be at the planning commission level because there are some land use related components to it.
it's a good idea.
Yeah,
Bill.
Planning Commission Chairman, Mark just looked at,
Thumbs down.
So, Mr. Mayor, can we give staff direction that, it sounds like this is what we're all thinking we want to do. And go back and the hearing would be at planning, and then it would come to us for.
so it'd be published that there's a proposed ordinance. And then that's where then we would post the correct version that we intend to adopt on the website.
Yep.
Then that would be discussed at a public hearing and then come back to council for final approval. We'll get the process for something like that to work.
Was it everybody in agreement on that? That's.
I think so. I think so.
I don't know what else.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yes.
So I'm just thinking, I'm looking through the list of eligible businesses, and considering opportunities. So vendors selling primary vitamins, health-related supplements, and skincare products. Does that necessarily mean like for people? I mean,
Or is that like Mary Kay Cosmetics or
Well,
somebody working on?
well,
that?
that's such the difference though. With that though, Jay, that's addressed in number one, a movable place of business. If you're doing a door-to-door type of business, that would not be allowed.
To have somebody coming into their house.
But again, that would be
Red
addressed
River's a
by,
full of
that
cottage
would be,
industry.
that would be addressed by the industrial and commercial.
Okay.
Right? I'm thinking like, a vet clinic, for instance,
Yeah,
would,
Yes.
vitamins, health-related supplements, skincare products for animals be
Yes.
considered?
It is, they did, the 2022 legislation for edibles is for, does include human and animal consumption, so yes, the vet can could
Yeah.
potentially do it underneath that. Application there.
There's people giving their pets THC
Yeah,
Yeah,
all the time.
especially this weekend with the fireworks.
yeah. Exactly.
yeah. Okay. Any more questions, thought process?
We've given staff direction.
So are we directing staff then to both draft the ordinance for the low dose for the licensing and then the moratorium for the recreational use?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, just one more statement. I think
Yeah,
from my perspective, when we get to fall of 24, we should be looking back at our THC equivalent, our low dose, because I still think that this is not restricted enough personally.
yeah, a lot of too is gonna depend on what happens with the state.
Agree.
Uh,
And right now, to
Right.
be honest, commercial property popping up, that
mhm.
it's not gonna happen, but I just don't want it to fall through the cracks.
Can we make it conditional? Like, would require if a new business did pop up, asked to be rezoned as commercial. It gets a comp plan amendment, we do just as commercial or industrial, would that use be conditional, interim? Or would we have to grant a license?
Well, here's another question. Can that always be a conditional caveat? To using it anywhere, whether it's an industrial property or anything else? Can it be made, it's a conditional use that needs to be approved,
Well,
that zoning?
I think going back to your 1 per 12,500.
Yeah.
If someone else wants a license and council members don't want more than one, doesn't matter.
We're also, that's also based on what the state said today. State could change that very easily at their whim, and we could be stuck with that. And they could say, hey, you can have 4 for 12,000. Or they could change that. Going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're sitting there with
Right,
to talk or to address it. It's me,
you're making that whistling noise?
apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot yet to be determined in this one that.
Yeah.
We don't know even today, and I think this is
Many hypothetical.
this is a good first step to at least cover us in the interim gap, knowing that our moratorium is expiring at the beginning of next month. Not that we have any opportunities or any
Right.
people running in with license requests, but if we're not ready for it, at least that's something.
But I also agree with Abe that actually, we should be looking at this like August of 2024.
Mhm.
So that we have time to have a public hearing, to have time to do anything, if we have to make changes to that before 2025.
The Office of Cannabis Management is tasked with drafting some model ordinances for communities, which obviously we don't have to adopt as is. But that's part of what they're supposed to be doing, and as we get more and more information of what we can do, what we can't do, what's this regulatory structure going to look like? We'll all be, I think, all cities are going to be actively looking at this over the course of the next year. Trying to get us in the best place we can, so that when that January 2025 comes around. These moratoriums fall off, we'll have a structure in place that is allowed. And works within the context of the state structure that we can do. So we'll be watching it and monitoring it, and there's a lot more to come on it, I think, at this point in time, but this is just kind of the, I would say it's the first step, but I think it's actually step 2, because 2022 with that moratorium kicked us into step 1, so I think this is step 2 of the process.
I think just, council members too, the League of Minnesota Cities is having just looking to see if I find when that was gonna happen, but they're gonna have an upcoming webinar about understanding this. If I find the email, I'll make sure you guys all have the link and everything to it.
I want to say it's July 25th, but
And that date,
not 100% sure.
yeah, I can't find it right now, but I'll look for it later. And I think you guys all get the emails from the league, so you guys probably got it already as well.
I know there was a session, a small portion earlier this year too.
Yeah, but I think that was prior to the law being actually passed.
Okay.
Yeah,
They keep expanding and getting more and more information as they get a chance to digest the law more and more and try and figure out what it's allowing and what it's saying. So what I had in that presentation is just very, very high level of what's in there, but it at least kind of gives you a, kind of the initial framework of what we're looking at.
okay. Perfect. You got the direction you need?
Got the direction we need. We will work
Perfect.
on the moratorium and the low dose ordinance.
Yeah, awesome. All right, sounds good. Move into 7.5, request for proposals for architect services for government center. Kathy.
Right, thank you, Mayor. Since I believe since the date of my interview, I've heard conversations about kind of the new City Hall Government Center that we're looking at and council's been discussing and looking for. And really to kind of get us started in that process of moving down that line and getting us ready. I know there's been conversations and some discussions and looking at some property, but kind of the going hand in hand with that is getting an architect on board to start looking at kind of that space needs. Doing that analysis and putting together a concept design. So that concept design can then get a cost estimate and give us that concept estimate. So we can start looking at a budget and figuring out how we budget and prepare for all of this stuff and what does it look like for us. So this is kind of a beginning stage to get us an architect and engineering services on board for the process. It's divided out into 2 phases. So phase 1 would really be that space analysis and the concept design. Once we get to that point, we would then have to authorize phase 2 of the project, which would take us on into schematic design, design draws and construction drawing, which gives us what we need to go out for bid and then for the construction. So just looking for council's approval to go ahead and post the RFP and put that out there and see what we get in. If approved tonight, we get it out by the end of this week with proposals due on August 7th. So we could do that review process and then bring it back to council for approval of a selection.
Okay. And just to clarify, this is budgeted for this year.
Yes, there was money, 100,000 put in the budget for 2023 for design work for a new facility. So this would be starting in on that process with the budget that we have.
Okay, council members, questions? Jane?
Is there a place to put it yet?
We've been working with a couple properties. We don't have anything there yet, but this is one of those things that might help us when we do find a spot, if it's appropriate.
I mean, my thoughts on it are. I think we should probably divide this as it is divided in 2, and I think we should just work on the first part, which would be space needs. Kind of a preliminary layout of what we would need before we go, get too crazy about going forward with everything else. Until we've got a piece of property to put it on, because there's, depending on what we have, it's going to change the needs for that. And I think we'd be wasting money by going too far forward with actually having a design and everything else until we actually have a layout and what we're going to do. But I think what you could do is, a study to figure out exactly what we do need. And I don't know that it's completely all with an architectural firm doing it. I think we also, from from within probably need to define what we need, or for say the next 20 years or so. What would we use the property for? What things would we house in it? All the rest of that. I think that we should probably go forward with more work on our end. Whether it be with a consultant or not, to define what we need. And then you can go out for a true proposal for an RFP for a design. And construction management, et cetera. Further down the road. That's just my thoughts on it. I think we're moving far too quickly with too much money and locking ourselves in. Whereas we can at least just spend the money to get a design, not necessarily design, but concept of what we're looking for, but also the different needs for it, which I'm not sure that an architecture firm is maybe the best. I think we should probably do that in-house a little bit, with at least coming up with, whether we do a couple of workshops first to figure out, what is this going to do? Are we going to house snow plows in it? Are we going to, are we going to have a highway department? Are we going to have a trail maintenance shop in it? The different things that we're doing with it, and how many offices we need, or what we think for staff. But I think we should come up with that first.
After the meeting, I can show you the concept we have on paper already,
Okay.
So Kathy, in this, you do have it broken out in the RFP as 2 steps: review and analysis, analyze the space needs, and then step 2 was the schematic design piece. It doesn't determine a schedule that those happen concurrently, or when step 2 follows step 1.
Correct, you have phase 1, so this is to have the firm break it out into a phase 1 cost estimate, and then there'd be your phase 2. So this envisions moving forward with a phase 1, kind of looking at that space needs and working with them, and they obviously, they cannot do it without our input, so it would be a driven process with everybody to determine what it is we're looking at, what do we want, what do we see as our vision. We'll be starting to build that out ourselves as we start looking at kind of that 2024 budget and forecasting capital budget moving forward. Those conversations will start happening along with that process. So we're going to start working towards that one as it is. And so that will kind of start helping to feed some of this, but you'll get that space needs analysis and a concept design. Concept design is basically boxes. We put big box here, kind of looking at, if we're looking at this is our space needs, this is the square footage that this box is going to need, this is the square footage that this box is going to need. So office space is going to need this many square foot. A council chambers, you need this many square feet for that. You want 2 meeting rooms. Okay, we need this much in square footage for this. We're looking at a public works garage that is going to house X, so you're going to need this much square foot. So concept design is plopping those big boxes down, giving us that, and then once we have those and we're kind of looking at the square footage, we can kind of get that cost estimate rolling to look at what is this going to cost us. That's phase 1. Phase 1 ends when we kind of get to that point of getting that cost estimate. This is kind of what we're all nodding our head going, yep, that looks like what we need. Space conceptually, looking at it there. Give us a cost estimate. Well, now we have to start figuring out how do we pay for it, when we can move forward, and how does all that work. Phase 2 would not move forward until authorized and approved to move forward by council. So if we look at it and we say, well, it's going to take us 2 to 3 years to get ready on the budget side to do this, or we're still looking at land and we don't have the land for this yet, then we are holding on that phase 2 execution until the timing makes it right to move forward. I've gone through this process where we've done, a concept design on one hand with an architectural firm that we didn't have them really under contract, that moved them forward into the rest. And then you basically went back through and we had it somewhat start over because another architectural firm was selected to go on the other side. And so you had to redo a lot of that base work. So that's why I have it prepped this way, is so you have phase 1 to do the initial work and kind of help us through to that. And then phase 2 execution can follow when we get ready for it down the road. But we have one one firm hopefully under contract at that point in time to take us all the way through.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, so. I tend to agree with both what I've heard. I do feel like we're getting the cart before the horse. But I get also that you got a contractor that did something and then you go back and you find a different one and now you're going through the whole process. From an RFP perspective, is the architect, engineers that are creating this RFPs understanding that we might have a X number of months, X number of years delay before that? And now am I putting an RFP out there saying I'm going to do the job for this? And now a year passes and now we've got another, inflationary and now I can't really justify it. Are we getting ourselves in an issue there?
Typically, architects are building, when you're looking at that phase 2 work, it's a percentage of your construction costs.
Okay.
So they'll put usually you get a firm price on that phase 1, here's the cost to get you through this, here's a process that will run. It would be, this project more of an engagement with staff and the involvement there, engagement with council, probably work session or 2 there. As we build this all out and what do we get to, and there's a cost associated with that. And then phase 2 work is usually done on a percentage basis of your construction cost.
Okay.
That kind of decide what that number is looking like when we get to, our estimates and where we're going there, so. This is. It's early in the process, but at the same time too, to get the space needs and start to developing something, this is kind of, where we can go. We can hold and delay, and that's kind of like I said, those are the alternatives. But to get us to a point where we can have some kind of a budget number that we're starting to work towards, and have an idea of what we're looking at. This is kind of getting that phase 1 rolling.
I like the fact that you're bringing this forward because we do need to push it. And I think actually the concept part and the budgeting is really important so that we can try to get those going. We need to do that, probably needed to do that already this year in order to be thinking about our next year's budget to get that in. What I do think though is that this isn't that giant a project where we're going to really lose anything in not in waiting and possibly having a different firm finish it. We have a couple other things that are going on. I mean, it could take a couple of years to do this. We could have an economy that falls apart on us and costs go down versus right now where we're looking at inflation still. And you're looking at saying to somebody, I don't have this defined project that I want you to design yet, but I'd really like to get the final costs in now. That might be 2 or 3 years out that you're actually doing it and have them consider whether or not we're going to be adding inflation or deflation into it. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to wait on that second part. I do think that the first part we should really act on very quickly so that we can get an initial concept, find out what we need in it, and make and also a rough cost of what we're going to be doing so we can make some decisions on that. But then once we have something, it just refines the RFP that we put out later for somebody to actually provide the engineering and the design. It could be a cheaper, better, more in line with what we come up with during the first phase. And having a few extra people having an opportunity to look at it and give us input on it.
Okay. Brent, you look like you're about ready to say something down there.
Well. I know that we had some sketches and designs done last year. It was a really good start. But 2 years ago, we would have said, okay, let's get this thing put together and let's design this and get it done. And I don't know a lot about space usage, but experts are better at space usage than I think we are. But now that we are sitting, now that we have staff, now that staff is driving this, I think we kind of all have ideas what we think we might want in this, and it sounds like that is input that would come in. But we've got to start turning this, all of these things over to staff. That's what we hired Kathy for. We have our finance person here. And I don't think this is something that we can necessarily drive anymore. If we're gonna back away from being a governing body and not being quite as hands-on. We've got to get started on it now. Maybe we'll find the perfect piece of property here. And that's probably another discussion we should have is, are we gonna keep searching ourselves and trying to make a deal, or are we gonna have someone go in and try to broker something for us? But I think we need to start on this. We've been talking about it for a long time. All of a sudden, we're gonna have to have trucks to plow snow, and I don't know where we're gonna put it. So I think we need to get started, and I give Kathy a lot of credit for getting this going. I think we need to get it approved and start.
Okay. Leroy? What are you thinking?
Thinking we don't need a Taj Mahal, we need a maintenance building / city hall. And then down the road, we could put something else up, but we need something, we need it now. So,
But I think in terms of space utilization, and they're gonna have ideas. I mean, we could all sketch up what we
Oh,
think
yeah.
it would look like, and they would all be probably workable. Because I think we all kind of have a vision that where it is, but we're not experts in terms of having this so that it was secure buildings, so that when staff is here. I mean, you know, a lot of cities are looking at more security for their staff. There's a lot of variables that we need to take into consideration. And even the five of us together, while we certainly all have some ideas, but putting it all together, coming in with best practices, what have other people done? What hasn't worked, what has worked, if we're gonna do it. And I think if we're going to say to the residents, we're going to do this, they're gonna be much more open to it. Yes, it doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal, but it has to be well done, well thought through, so that the residents say, yeah, all right, that looks pretty good. We don't have to have a round wall like in another city. But let's have something workable, workforce going into the future, and I think our residents will buy into it.
Well, I agree. I think whatever we do, you're right.
Yeah.
We don't need.
No round walls.
We don't need the castle, don't need a
Yeah.
moat or anything. It
Nope.
just, but I agree that, having somebody help with. Conceptualize the design and the space, I think is important. Make sure we're making the right
You
investment.
like that, no round walls.
no round walls, and if we don't have to rent a tent again, that'd be great.
Yeah, we could really good.
Yeah, we don't need to have the
Heaters-
election
heaters in the
election
tents.
line underneath the tent in the parking lot. Right?
Maybe an air
So-
conditioning unit on the roof so that the mice don't be through the.
The wiring.
the wiring.
So that,
Yeah.
so that our council meetings, it's not 90
Yeah.
degrees in
But
there.
yeah.
So, okay, the one piece though, I do want to cover is Jay still has that question and suggestion on possibly eliminating phase 2 of this. RFP, right?
Yeah,
Is that still your question? that
it's-
still
well,
wasn't
actually-
answered, Or,
Yeah, actually, possibly adding in maybe enhancement of step 1 and then holding off on step 2 until we have that. I mean, some of the things that you can get out of step 1 are it gives you a much better idea of what kind of a piece of property you need and how that should be, so that might eliminate something that's being looked at now, or it might actually speed up the ability to pick up a particular one, because then we would know what would need to be fit on it. But I do really think that until we have an idea of what we're gonna build and a budget and the rest of it, I think we should hold off on doing step 2. And that could be a second RFP. I mean, what it does is it gives you your first one may win step 1. is in a very good position probably to win step two. But they'll have to be at least competitive. I don't think we're losing anything by waiting. I really don't.
If I can, and I don't mean to
Yeah.
disagree, but I look at the time and effort and staff time that's going into your drafting, your review process, your selection process, your interviews, and as you go through it, is if you wrap it all up into one, like I said. Phase one ends, they're not automatically going into phase two. Council has to authorize it. You could never authorize phase two and be done and say, you know what, we weren't happy with them, we are not going to authorize phase two, we want to go out for a separate one. Or you have it in place so that you can authorize it and you can allow it to move forward. Maybe there's a delay. They're gonna understand that as they're working through all this with us to get there. So if there's a delay, you have it, but then we don't have to go through the administrative steps of doing all of this all over again. And with limited staff, I look at those administrative steps and go, it's not much, but it's a lot when we're doing everything else. So, I mean. I don't mean to disagree with you. I fully agree that phase one. Needs to happen and phase two may happen down the road, but I think. If it's a separate. It's a contract amendment to move forward. You have it all in one. You don't have to move forward in phase two if you're not happy with them. We're not ready to go. We decide we don't want to move forward or we're not going to build something. You're not bound to do it. And so but if you decide you want to do it, you don't have to go back through the administrative.
So-
To get there.
So in other words, we, clearly the RFP doesn't contract anything, the contract that we would sign with the firm would. And it depends on the language of the contract, whether we'd be bound to using them. For the second phase or not,
Correct.
basically.
Yeah.
So again, that decision can be made.
Right.
When that time comes, Jay.
And also, I guess I would just like to say. It's fairly easy to define what we're asking them to do. In step one, where we're looking for a fixed fee. And. But before we've actually really gotten what we need or understand what we're going to be looking for. I don't really like the idea of committing to essentially a percentage fee based fee of cost. Of work when it hasn't been defined yet. At this point.
So again, this is an opportunity though, that we could step away from that vendor
We should make sure that we can.
at that point.
Yeah.
Well, again, that's the language in the contract that we would approve. We would have to make sure that that contract language fit what we want.
Right.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, I am going to make a motion that we approve the posting of the request for proposals for architect services for the design of the governance center.
Okay. Thank you, Brent. Got a motion? Does anybody want to make a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Leroy. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have a couple more questions.
Okay.
Sorry to belabor it a little bit more, guys.
Oh, no.
Being new to city council, how do we have this work session so that we can also have some input? I know you guys have had some schematic drawings and I'm just concerned now we're gonna have this concept plan, we're gonna put this together. I agree, Brent, that we shouldn't be necessarily down in the weeds, but at the same point, we do have a pretty new city administrator, where she's still trying to figure some stuff out. I don't think we're at the point just to hand it all over. I think there does need to be some direction in there. So I think that while we should go out for an RFP, and I think that's fine, and I like the fact that you can just have a percentage of step two and then it makes it a lot easier. I'm fine with that. But I think we should have a work session or something that we can start to talk through these things to give staff more direction when they start to have that concept plan.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My response, I think Kathy mentioned earlier, that part of the process that the contractor, the firm we contract with would walk through that with council. Right, Kathy, is that my understanding? Did I understand that correctly?
Right, usually in doing that space analysis and those, coming up with a concept design. depending on what the building is depending on where you're going, but with this one, you know, we would be putting together some initial and then probably getting some guidance and stuff with council. They always have process that they go through. The most recent one I did was a community center, so you had a lot of community input and community engagement in the process to define what the needs were and what the wants were to put together that concept base. This one, you know, is going to have more of the council input and involvement in that design. And like I said, well, and some of that's not going to be strictly focused in on the work here, but it's also going to be coming with, you know, as we start talking 2024 budget, we start talking CIP and we start looking at what do we want to do. Those conversations are also going to feed into our work with this person, you know, this contractor for designing, because okay, what are we putting into that budget? What are we looking at? How are we looking at? Public Works is the biggest player out there. That's gonna help as we're setting that up and we're talking about that. That's also gonna help feed what we start having the conversations with here and how we start looking at that. So it'll be more than one piece, but you know, I see that the council being involved in this session and helping to drive that and guide that, or, you know, here's what we're coming up with and bringing that to council to say, okay, yes, no, modify this, what do we think? And moving it forward in that manner.
And Mr. Oh, go
I
ahead.
think Gabe had one more,
Oh, fine.
at least one more.
So I agree with that. I'm just thinking, again, private sector, right? There's a lot of back and forth that goes on. And I think that if we can have a session beforehand to say, okay, we know that they're gonna ask these things, right? The first question is gonna be, well, what are your needs? And I think it'd be a lot better to be able to have the conversation before it and be able to do that. That'd be great. My only other second point is I think we got to get communication out on this like immediately to the public, because this is one of those things that even though we don't need the Taj Mahal, it's going to be perceived as the Taj Mahal for a lot of people, because for a lot of people, this is just fine. Because I never come here, I never have to worry about it. Now I'm spending more of my money on it. So I think we gotta start getting that on the front page of the website of here's what's happening.
Yeah.
And then I'm done.
I was just gonna say, we do have people here that understand this stuff. Jay has years of experience in terms of space and building out and all of that, and I think that would come in very handy. Chris and Leroy, I mean, you guys have seen every garage there is, and you know from a service standpoint, and Leroy's had this dream for years as to how he wants the doors to be and how long. No, and that's great, because you know that, and that's where I think we do have council that has some background and some ideas. We need somebody to bring it all together. So, if you would call the question, I'd be fine.
I have one more comment. Where I'm at with this, I am completely for step one. But if step one includes step two at this point, I'm a no.
Okay. Well, I've got a motion on the table. I think we'll vote on that motion and see where we land. So I've got a motion by Brent to approve the release of the RFP for architectural services for the government center. I've got a second by Leroy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1 with council members Satterbach dissenting on that. All right, cool. Number 8, approval of claims listings. We already did that in consent agenda. We should remember to remove that from future agendas in that spot. Section 9, staff and council member updates. 9.1 2024 budget process. Kathy.
Right, Mayor, I can share my screen just so everybody has a visual on what it is we're looking at here. For 2024, this is just kind of an update for council. We are starting to put together that 2024 budget. Dominique and I have had several conversations on it starting already, just trying to look at what we have, where we at, and where do we need to go with the process. So July and August, staff is working on our estimates and project needs for 2024. We've got meetings set up with most staff members so we can kind of get their input and start feeding all of that together. All that's gearing towards an August 21st, 2023 at we'll have a work session to kind of present those initial budget projections and get your feedback and priorities, and then we'll kind of use that to build a budget on out. At this one, I anticipate lots of discussions on, you know, public works, kind of looking at here's some proposed plans, you know, for how do we start building out some of those capabilities and what are we looking at? And bringing in some information in regards to that one, looking and a lot on that kind of more in depth on a capital improvement plan beyond just the streets and the kind of the engineering piece. You know, pieces like you know, we've talked park master planning is part of one of the priorities that's theirs. So really trying to pull together a lot of that information for you for that work session. So you can kind of take a look at it and say, what are our priorities? Where do we want to go? What do we want to include? Or I know that was a priority, but let's not do that in this year. Let's bounce that out a year or two. So we can keep working on that. So that's really that August 21st date. September 6th will be an alternative date for us. If we need any further discussions, need to bring something back to help inform the discussion from the 21st. With September 18th, that council meeting being the final presentation for our preliminary budget. And then the budget and levy must be certified to the county by September 30th. So September 18th will be our target date for approval of that preliminary budget and levy. Just a reminder, the preliminary budget is just our maximum. We can't go above that with our final, but we can always bring the final down as we work to streamline it and bring it all into alignment with where we want to go. As I say, with being fairly new, as we've all talked about, you know, preliminary as we look at it, maybe a little bit higher, and then bringing it down as we have more time to kind of get my feet under me and make recommendations to you that way. But we'll be looking at that one. Then October through December, we'll be refining that. December 4th, by statute, we have to have a public meeting for the public to be able to comment on the budget. So that will be at the December 4th, 2023 city council meeting with council adoption of the final budget, if they're ready for it, that one, or if there's something that comes up at that meeting that you wish to see some information on, then we would bring it back at the December 18th meeting for final approval to be certified to the county by the December 30th date. So that is kind of what we're looking at for the budget process. Get everything kicked off and we know where it's coming from.
Perfect. So August 21st, that's our second meeting in August, so we'll follow council meeting with the workshop and same thing September and yeah, by September 18th, setting the preliminary max levy. Any questions, thoughts on that? Are you guys all good?
Yeah, it's good.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. 9.2, Leroy, and you know, I think I'll introduce us a little bit. As Leroy suggested, over the last 2 weeks, we had 4 call them community meetings, I suppose, in our 4 neighborhood parks. Each council member was a part of one of them, and you know, we had Kathy with myself at each one. Really good conversations, I think, at all of them. They're all had similar conversations along the way. Leroy, I think you had a couple of takeaways that you wanted to talk about a little bit from the one you attended anyways.
Yeah, in the Casey park meeting, most of the residents' questions were, when is sewer coming into our neighborhood?
They're really concerned about the timing.
The best shot, I told them I could give them 15 to 20 years. I said it's been at our border since I've been almost on the board, and it hasn't moved a foot, and that's going on 23 years. So, but once it comes, it's going to move this way quickly. But So they'd like a couple of their roads overlaid in there. The inch and a half overlay that we've been doing instead of patching has been holding up real well. And they said they would be happy, maybe with grinding it and overlaying. So I asked Bear Lake Blacktop to just come up with some estimates, and Shane can go in and do an estimate too. So, and the other one is they'd like some ditches and culverts, or not ditches, culverts cleaned out and hydrovac'd out on Clary Place and on Pharisee Lane. So I'm gonna get some prices on that also. Maybe we'll do one street, possibly this year, we'll see, and another one next year.
So you're thinking both, because I know some were plugged inside,
Yeah.
but then pull away some of the sediment on the.
3-4 feet
Yeah,
out
kinda
on the
like
culverts, like
We
we
did
did
on 170th that one year.
and on Casey Parkway.
Yeah,
So seems to work.
at least it gets it, extends the life a little bit.
That's the one gal Marlene said, it's not good anymore. My cat can't get through the culvert.
She did.
Okay.
That's the true test.
Apparently, that's a true test.
So
And I think some of those too. You know, Leroy and I have been out there in the springs from time to time with Goliath standing there in knee deep water in those ditches, trying to find the culvert and shovel the ice away so we can jet them out, and
not fun.
not fun. So pulling away some of the sediment and opening some of those up does make a difference in that one. Yeah, that 1 year we spent a lot of time and money that year. Yeah.
But it was fun. Granted, the telehandler with a 8-foot bucket on it. Away we went. Anyhow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was one of the discussions. The other one was getting all the basketball courts possibly crack filled and resurfaced, so
Yeah.
in all the parks.
And they all do need it.
Yep.
That's been a while. I know they Kathy, it's one of the first things we noticed in every one of them that we stopped, and every one of them's got weeds growing through and stuff like that. We did have one request in one neighborhood in particular that we stripe it out so they can play pickleball on it. They would provide their own net, they said. So a lot of good thoughts. We did have, the parks did come up again, and another one, Brent, at Scottview.
Scottview, it was Parks and Development, pretty much.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
most of it was, yeah.
They were looking for opportunities. What does the capital improvement for our parks look like? When is there opportunities for new stuff as you know, the stuff that's in there ages out,
Absolutely.
which is a fair question.
Well, and some of it needs to be replaced just because it from a structural standpoint, it may look good on the outside. It doesn't necessarily look good on the inside.
And safety standards change and everything like that as well. So, yep, absolutely.
And we have not had those, I don't think we've ever had those inspected by a person with the certification to do the inspection.
What items do we have in some of the other parks?
You're not certified.
No, I am certified. Not me.
Jay, they're pretty similar. They all have some sort of a swing set sort of contraption with a slide. Some of them look a little different, you know, so the same one that's in your neighborhood Country Court where you live, that's the same one that's in Casey's edition.
Okay.
Pretty much the
But
same.
the swings,
Yeah,
the
the one-
swings in Country Court were replaced.
well, we replaced the whole top bar.
Yeah, well, the whole
Because
swing unit.
Somebody swiped the swings out of there, replaced it with their ones from the Rainbow system, and the
Yeah.
the if that wasn't bad enough, the hooks that they used to hang those swings from there wrecked the structure. So we had to replace the entire structure. It wasn't just the swings. Yeah.
So do we have a need to actually do some sort of an inspection on all of these, or should we just think about that? As far as make an
Would be-
annual or,
Are you
or something.
volunteering?
well, not necessarily.
You're
but I mean-
retired, so now you
Right,
you
right.
become
I'm just wondering if we should, we don't have a plan to
We
inspect them on a regularity.
did
So,
use the people that installed them were the ones that were certified when they installed them. So then we went with the St. Croix systems that
Right.
most of the schools and everybody uses, so.
Would it be wise to maybe have them come and take a look at everything on a
I think that's a perfect,
semi?
perfect place to start a CIP for parks.
Yes.
Mhm.
Because you can't see in what's going on inside. You can look at the outside, say, oh, it looks good, does need a little paint maybe, but as the inside starts to deteriorate, that's where you have water.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rust and then they.
Yep.
Yeah, fasteners and all that,
Yep.
absolutely.
Anyhow,
So yeah, so those were big things, what else were big topics? What else do we have, Kathy, that was consistent, I mean, like, development and sewer and water was consistent amongst all of them. A lot of the timing for some of the neighborhoods,
speeding through the neighborhood.
speeding through neighborhoods, always, yeah, oh, that's right, they want the signs.
Yeah.
Stop signs, they want to remove the stop signs or.
No, they want them back
They
now,
want them back or,
in Casey's addition.
right?
Probably.
They wanted them out.
Well,
now
they
they want
wanted
them
it back in Scottview, you remember? They-
Yeah.
And then now that the stop signs are back in Scottsview, they want those removed,
Right.
Because they get stuck in the hill now.
so.
Chris, we had discussion, I think we had people that really didn't understand our situation with Scott County Sheriff's Office, at least at Scottsview we did. And once they found out, they were like, oh yeah, we're seeing them a lot. And I think Kathy made a really good point where she said, well, pretty much the deputies, except for us, are patrolling the county roads, our deputies are going in. People understood that, and I don't think they really understood the fire department situation for full-time on staff there all the time. Once that was explained, people are like, okay, well, then that, everybody's taxes are too high. But that, I thought we covered that. Staff covered that really well, it's got.
Yeah, so. So overall, I think it went over really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. it was
Good
very
feedback
well.
from everybody, each one.
Yep.
And I think definitely something we keep in mind for future again.
Chris, you did a very good job leading the discussion. I'm sure all of them, but Scott, you and I was there, so I thank you for your leadership on that and driving these. I think it was really good.
Thank you.
Yep, I agree.
It was good, happy to do it, so we'll definitely get that, figure out what the timing looks like for doing that sometime again.
And that was about it for the park things, I guess.
Yeah.
And the overlays, like I said, get some prices on that. Spraying for brush on our gravel roads and on some of our blacktop roads. We do that the last couple of years. So the vendor's out 6 to 8 miles, he's gonna spray again. So. He also has the contract for Scott County. Those prices are going up next year because. The people that the county had hired were charging $100 something a mile. And he's only charging 45 or 65. Once he found out the difference after they accepted his bid. He wasn't happy. But anyhow,
Perfect. Okay, so anybody have anything else? No?
No, I'll make a
Alright.
motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Abe. Second. Thank you, Jay. A motion and a second to adjourn, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.